You might remember my last project video when I made a Bullpup kit for my AK. That was actually my best performing video on the channel. Since you guys liked it so much, I've done some more work on it, and now Brandon Herrera can have an even bigger aneurysm. My first version had a few problems. It didn't look great, there wasn't a good place to put your sport hand, and aside from an optic riser, there was nowhere to add any attachments. Also, the exposed trigger linkage could possibly lead to an accidental discharge. Now, any normal person would start with mechanical parts and make sure they actually work well before focusing on the rail's aesthetics. But I have the mental capacity of a trained gorilla, so the first thing I worked on were the front handguards. This is where the first problem arose. AK lower handguards attach with the nub that goes into the front trunnion, and the lower handguard retainer which locks in place, clamping the handguard in the middle. The problem is that the lower handguard retainer has a sling loop on its left side, meaning that my longer rail wouldn't fit. I could simply cut off the sling loop, or I could even solve this in the same way as Zenitco, and cut a giant hole in the side of the handguard. But this is made of thin 3D printed plastic, so I felt that would make it too weak. Since I don't like either of those options, I chose to 3D print my own lower handguard retainer, except without a sling loop. Another problem with the lower handguard was how tight the slot for the retainer was. More specifically, there wasn't really a good way to get the support material out of it. I ended up heating up an Allen wrench with a lighter and using that to melt out the supports, and that actually worked pretty well. For the upper handguard, I took a page out of Zenitco's book and made it attach to the gas tube and then screw into the lower. I actually didn't really have any problems with the upper handguard. I just had to reprint it in a different orientation to make the surfaces look better and to avoid the rail warping. And that's the handguards pretty much done. I went ahead and put a P&W logo on the front of the Picatinny rail, and then moved on to the actual hard part, making the enclosed trigger linkage. Since I already made a stock for the first version, I went ahead and reused it as a base to add on to. Unfortunately, AKs have a lot of crap sticking out the sides of them. Rivets, stock hooks, selector switches, and even charging handles, and I have to design a way for the stock and trigger linkage to fit over all of these. I started out by designing the linkage bars and ensuring they could fit over the rivets, and then designed the rest of the stock around it. I won't go into detail about the process, but let's just say I had to make a lot of test prints. Also, the old stock was made of hard plastic and it was super uncomfortable. So this is where we get really fancy. I got myself a roll of TPU filament. The main feature of TPU is that it's a bitch to print with. It's also flexible, so making the end of the stock out of it will be a lot more comfortable. Now that everything's all put together, I actually think it turned out really good, and I would love to know what you think. Thanks for watching, and if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go drive my 16-foot tall white girl whip through the Burger King parking lot. Oh yeah, I'll probably make a video of this at the field sometime soon. So whenever that comes out, I'll put a link to it in the description.